This is happiness. I mean, winning is one thing, but when it's your horse, right?
Yeah.
When Ralph returns from Miami in season 3, he becomes the single most profitable figure in Tony Soprano's entire criminal operation. But with that wealth came arrogance, volatility, and a relationship that would ultimately implode. From the moment Ralph re-enters the picture, he stands out. He's louder, sharper, and more ambitious than most. Unlike Paulie or Silvio, Ralph treats the mob like a business. Every connection, every deal, every favor, he monetizes it. That's why, despite Tony's personal dislike for him, Ralph quickly becomes indispensable. His empire is built on the Esplanade construction project, a massive state-backed development that becomes the family's most profitable racket. Ralph orchestrates union manipulation, kickbacks from contractors, and no-show jobs, all standard mafia tactics, but on a far larger scale. He controls the laborers through intimidation, inflates contracts, and ensures that every brick laid generates cash for him, and by extension, for Tony. In mob economics, construction is the holy grail. It's steady, high volume, and easy to skim. Ralph knew that. While the others squabbled over gambling routes and loan sharking profits, Ralph was pulling in hundreds of thousands through legitimate fronts. His envelope to Tony was heavier than anyone else's. Tony even admits it outright. In season 4, he calls Ralph his best earner. But being the best earner doesn't make you the best subordinate.
Where's the hose?
Ralph's problem was that he made Tony rich and never let him forget it. He weaponized his productivity. Every time Tony confronted him about his behavior, Ralph leaned on the unspoken truth, which was that Tony needed him. Ralph's downfall begins where his success peaks. With the racehorse, the horse symbolizes everything about Ralph, greed disguised as ambition. When the horse starts winning races, Ralph treats it as both a business and a status symbol. Tony, meanwhile, becomes emotionally attached to it. The partnership starts as financial and ends as personal conflict. When the horse dies in a suspicious stable fire, Ralph's reaction is cold and transactional. He talks about insurance money while Tony mourns. That disconnect between Tony's sentimentality and Ralph's cold pragmatism triggers the fatal confrontation. Tony kills Ralph impulsively, driven less by certainty and more by disgust. Whether or not Ralph actually set the fire almost doesn't matter. What matters is that Tony's emotional code finally overpowered his business instincts. In that moment, Tony kills his best earner.
It was all downhill from here.
The man who made him more money than anyone else. The aftermath says everything about Ralph's value. Tony and Christopher spend the night dismembering his body. Not just erasing a man, but erasing a revenue stream. After Ralph's death, the Esplanade project collapses, and Tony's income takes a hit that's never fully repaired. Ralph Cifaretto's brief reign marked the financial high point of Tony's criminal career. No capo after him, not Vito, not Carlo, ever matched the scale of Ralph's earnings. But that wealth came at a cost. Ralph's arrogance exposed Tony's weakness, his inability to separate emotion from business. In the end, Tony chose pride over profit, and the family never recovered from that decision. Ralph's death didn't just end a man's life, it marked the moment Tony's empire began to decline. Vito, on the other hand, was never the type to make waves. He worked his way up quietly, building trust through loyalty and competence rather than through flamboyant shows of wealth or aggression. When Ralph Cifaretto was killed, Tony needed continuity. Vito stepped into that gap and took over rackets that had once been Ralph's domain, construction kickbacks, union influence, and no-show jobs. But those operations were never the scale of the Esplanade. They were steady bread-and-butter rackets, not explosive, headline-grabbing contracts. Vito ran them with quiet efficiency, keeping the income flowing without drama. For Tony, that was appealing in a different way. Where Ralph required constant management and created constant tension, Vito required none. He was dependable. That stability in its own way was valuable, but it came at the cost of top-line growth. That difference shaped Tony's take. Tony tolerated Ralph's insults, his unpredictability, even his cruelty, because Ralph brought in more money than anyone else, and quickly. Vito didn't threaten Tony emotionally in the same way, but he didn't deliver Ralph's level of revenue. Where Ralph could bring in $500,000 a year in tribute at his peak, Vito likely brought in closer to $200,000. Another contrast is loyalty. Ralph leveraged his value to challenge Tony's authority, flaunting disrespect because he knew his profits protected him. Vito, in comparison, was compliant. He didn't test boundaries. He delivered his tribute without drama. From Tony's perspective, Vito was the kind of capo every boss wishes for. Quiet, steady, and loyal. But in the cutthroat world of the family, loyalty is rarely enough to outweigh profit. Vito's steadiness made him reliable, but Ralph's explosiveness made him indispensable, at least until Tony decided otherwise. That difference is why Ralph was Tony's best earner, and why Vito, while valuable, never reached the same heights. If we compare their estimated contributions to Tony's bottom line, The disparity is clear. Ralph's peak earnings, driven by massive construction rackets, generated millions in revenue and hundreds of thousands in tribute for Tony each year. Vito's earnings, while solid, never reached that scale. His consistent rackets brought in steady income, but without the large spikes Ralph had delivered. For Tony, that meant a trade-off. Ralph gave him money at the cost of constant drama and danger. Vito gave him peace at the cost of diminished returns. It was a quieter trade-off, less risky, but less rewarding. Vito's tenure as capo is marked by stability rather than spectacle. He was a safe pair of hands, able to keep operations running without bringing the kind of chaos Ralph embodied. But in the ledger of mob business, stability rarely trumps the scale of Ralph's rackets. Ralph's brief reign left Tony with more money than any other capo could deliver. Vito kept the ship afloat after the storm, but he did not recreate the tide Ralph once commanded. Where Ralph's death cost Tony the largest single source of income he'd ever had, Vito's steady work sustained the family at a lower level. Ralph was a high water mark. Vito was the slow, steady baseline that followed. Ralph Cifaretto and Vito Spatafor represent two very different approaches to making money for the family. Ralph brought in extraordinary sums through risk, aggression, and grand rackets. Vito brought in a steady flow of tribute through quiet management and loyalty. For Tony Soprano, Ralph was the greater earner and the greater risk. Vito was the quieter choice, a dependable replacement who kept the cash flowing but never matched Ralph's scale. In the balance between profit and peace, Tony had to choose. After Ralph's death, he chose peace, and the family's income reflected that choice.